A gang boss pressed an old black man's face to the concrete and called him useless. The block laughed, the guards looked away, and the air turned cruel. Seconds later, they learned who he really was. The chow line at Gray Ridge Prison moved like a metal river, trays clattering, boots scraping, voices stacked on top of voices. Inmates stood shoulder to shoulder under the fluorescents, each man a shadow with a number. At the front of the line, a big man with a buzz cut and knuckles like gravel tapped a plastic spoon on the steam table and grinned without warmth. "Look here," he said, loud enough to cross two tears. "New meat. Looks like a grandpa lost his way to bingo night." Heads turned. Conversations broke like glass. The new man was thin, 60-something, the sort of age you feel in the shoulders first. His hair ran close to his scalp, silver in places the razor missed. He held his tray steady, a bruise colored one cheekbone yellow and brown. He stared at the food and said nothing. The big man, Reeves they called him, the kind of leader who appoints himself when nobody else will, stepped into the man's path. Tattoos spiraled up his neck like rope. 3 of his lieutenants fanned out beside him, hungry for an audience. "You deaf, Grandpa?" Reeves said. "Or just useless?" A few men laughed. Someone whistled. The guards watched from their post a door, hands on belt radios, eyes doing that careful thing that keeps them uninvolved. The old man's tray sagged in his hands. His mouth tightened. He looked up, not at Reeves's face, but at the space just past it, like a man measuring a doorway. "Excuse me," he said. His voice had a courtroom quiet in it. "You're blocking the line." Reeves's smile spread. He grabbed the tray with one hand and tilted it. Mashed potatoes slid like a wave and burst across the floor. The room rippled with sound. "Now I'm blocking the line," Reeves said. He put one palm on the old man's chest. "What are you gonna do?" The old man didn't move. He blinked once. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the back, a radio crackled with a baseball score. The block smelled like bleach and steam. "You don't have to do this," the old man said. Reeves shoved him. The man stumbled. The metal edge of a table clipped his hip. Trays clanged. Voices rose, predatory and thrilled. A few inmates shifted, not toward the fight but toward the perimeter, the way men do when they want distance from the trouble that is about to happen. Reeves leaned in, his breath full of instant coffee and cigarettes. "Tell you what," he said, "you eat off the floor. You make it through your first day." The old man's lip bled where it had split on his tooth. He laced his fingers together and let them fall again. For a heartbeat, he looked tired in the way mountains look tired. Old, yes, but not weak. He shook his head. "No." Reeves's hand flashed. It was not a punch so much as a decision. The old man took it. He didn't lift a hand to block. He didn't plead. He just turned the blow with his shoulder and absorbed it like he'd learned how pain travels and where to put it. Silence, then a roar. "Break it up," a guard said, too late and too soft. Reeves hooked a foot behind the old man's ankles and pushed. The man's knees hit tile. The sound carried like a gavel. "Useless," Reeves said, "on the ground where you belong." The room ate it up. The cruelty, the bravado, the ugly relief of not being the target today. And yet, somewhere behind the jeers, there was a thin thread of disbelief, as though the block knew, in the blue light of its animal mind, that this was not going to end the way Reeves thought. They had no idea who he really was. His name, though it wasn't spoken much in here, was Leon Price. He had been a state senator for 12 years, before his seat went red in a year that broke a lot of things. He learned to dress invisible after that. The suits went to Goodwill. The pins and flags went to a box in a closet. He kept the habits that mattered, listening before speaking, noting who did what when their pride was at stake, asking for the story twice. He didn't owe Gray Ridge a sentence. If you read it in the paper, it said contempt of court, which was a simple label for a complicated day. A hearing about a county's refusal to comply with a reform statute. A judge who'd had enough. A prosecutor who smiled when he shouldn't have. Leon stood up to speak as a private citizen, and the judge told him to sit. Leon didn't. He finished a paragraph about dignity and due process. The judge gave him 90 days, the kind of 90 that fit into the space where principle meets punishment. Leon took it. He'd learned that change is a slow instrument. It requires time. He had time. He would spend it as carefully as a man spends the last bills in his wallet before a long drive. They processed him like they process everyone. The intake room had a bench nobody ever sat on twice. A nurse with a tired bun asked about allergies. The CO rattled off rules. They took his belt and laces. They asked about enemies. When he said he was fine, the CO gave him the look men get when they plan to disagree later. Leon knew to keep his hands open, his shoulders low, and his answers short. He knew to learn the names of the night shift and to thank the kitchen for the cornbread even when it was dry. He knew the quiet men who cleaned the floors understood power better than anyone else in the building. He knew mercy lives in small places. A second carton of milk slid across the counter. A door held open one beat longer than policy requires. All of that is why, when Reeves swaggered toward him in the chow hall, Leon didn't square up or step back. He looked at Reeves and saw a newspaper headline from 3 years ago, and a grief tattooed into rage. He saw a man whose army was 3 bored followers and a rumor. He saw a man who had told himself a story about who mattered and who didn't, and then found out the world disagreed. Leon didn't want to break him. He wanted to bend the room towards something better. But some men only learn when the ground moves under their feet. He tasted blood and felt his knees complain and thought of his late wife, who used to squeeze his hand at night and whisper, "Make your fights count, Leon." So he breathed. He counted 4 up, 4 down. He kept his eyes on the middle distance where dignity keeps its balance. He knew if he lost his temper, he would lose the room. He knew if he cried out, he would give Reeves the exact fuel he was after. He knew that sometimes you endure first and answer later. He also knew, because he had written the bill and argued for it in rooms with worse men, that justice was coming. It has its own clock. Reeves was not done. Bullies draw strength from the echo. He wanted the block to echo all morning. He set his boot beside Leon's tray as if the plastic were a neck. "On your knees is where you belong," he said. "Say it. Say you're useless." Leon tasted copper. He wiped his mouth with the pad of his thumb and looked up. His eyes were clear, which only made Reeves angrier. "Not today," Leon said. "Then we're not done." Reeves hooked his fingers into Leon's shirt and lifted him enough to make the tendons in Leon's neck stand out. The guards stepped as a unit and then stopped as a unit, hands touching radios they didn't raise. Paperwork is a kind of gravity. It holds everyone down. "You think someone's coming to save you, Grandpa?" Reeves taunted. "This is our world." In the back, a young inmate named Hall muttered, "Man, leave him be," under his breath. It was the kind of sentence that carries risk and gets ignored. Reeves released Leon and turned to his crew. "Look at this. This is what weakness gets you. This right here." He pressed Leon to the tile with 2 fingers to the sternum, as if the entire point of his body was to demonstrate a hierarchy. Leon's mind, meanwhile, traveled a different road. It went to a hearing room with bad coffee and a whiteboard covered in numbers. Sentences reduced by law, not mercy. Parole eligibility recalibrated. Case review requirements triggered by age. He saw faces, some he had hugged, some he had only seen in court, of men who walked free because a bill with his name on it got past the arguments and into the books. He remembered the first time a mother sent him a photograph of her son grilling in a backyard after 9 years away. He remembered the sour emails too, the ones that said he was soft on crime, that his mercy would end in blood. He breathed again. 4 and 4. Reeves tapped Leon's cheek with 2 fingers, mock friendly. "I'm talking to you." "Someone ought to," Leon said. "Who are you?" Reeves scoffed. "Nobody." Leon looked at him then, all the way. I'm a man who knows that the rules can change, he said quietly. What rules? Reeves jeered. The ones that made you king of this little hill. Laughter and derision braided into one sound. A tray crashed 3 tables over. The block was almost singing now, the way a boiler sings when pressure is near peaking. On the far wall, next to a faded poster about job training, a mounted television coughed to life on its schedule, volume low, captions flashing across the screen. Morning news, traffic, weather, politics. Nobody noticed. Not yet. Reeves moved as if to kick Leon's tray across the room just for punctuation. Leon closed his eyes and prayed the simplest prayer he knew. Help me not to hate him. Help me do this right. Then the room changed. The television's caption bar filled with words that were already old news outside but new in here, as all news becomes when it crosses steel. State reaches milestone, 500th release under Justice Reform Act, it read. Author former Senator Leon Price. The camera cut to a courthouse lawn. A reporter spoke into cold wind. The chyron stayed. A clip rolled, a younger Leon at a podium, sleeves rolled up, speaking in the measured cadence of someone who trusts his words to do their own work. Then B-roll. Families hugging at a bus stop, a man stepping through a doorway into light, a parole officer shaking hands instead of folding arms. Paul saw it first. Yo, he said, pointing. Yo, that's him. Heads turned in a wave. The block went quiet, which is not a thing it often does. Reeves followed their eyes and read the caption slowly. The color bled from his grin. No way, one of his lieutenants said, backing up like the floor was moving. On screen, the anchor read from the teleprompter, the kind of voice that makes everything sound equal in weight. Advocates say the law corrected decades of excessive sentencing. Critics warn of risks. The act's principal sponsor, former state senator Leon Price, could not be reached for comment while serving a 90-day contempt sentence related to a courtroom protest. Every head swung to the old man on the tile. Leon didn't look at the screen. He stayed where he was. He put one hand on the table and used it to stand. His knees cracked. He brushed the dust from his sleeves. Only then did he lift his eyes. A guard cleared his throat with a sound like a rusted hinge. The warden, who had stepped onto the unit catwalk 2 minutes earlier for a casual walkthrough that had turned into something else, lifted a hand. The officers on the floor froze. Nobody wanted to be the one who made the next mistake. You, Reeves said, the words suddenly too small for his mouth. That was you? Leon considered the truth and then gave it in the smallest possible dose. I helped write the law, he said. A lot of people helped get it passed. A lot of people fought it too. A ripple moved through the block, the kind that isn't seen so much as felt. Men who owed their date to that law looked away, overcome by the shape of grace when it is larger than your grudge. Men who had cursed that law because it didn't apply to them swallowed hard and revised a few opinions they hadn't realized were permanent. Reeves stepped back. His boot squeaked on the potato mash he'd spilled. The sound was strangely human. In the catwalk shadow, the warden spoke at last. Mr. Price, he called, with the kind of respect that makes a room stand straighter. Are you hurt? Leon rolled his jaw. I'll live. The warden's eyes slid to Reeves. And you, he said, not loud, not soft. In my office, now. Reeves didn't move. His face had learned the cost of performances. Leon raised a hand. Warden, he said. May I? The room puzzled over that. Who asked for permission in hell? The warden gave the smallest nod a man can give and still mean yes. Leon turned to Reeves. He didn't step closer. He left space for a man to choose who he was going to be. Mr. Reeves, he said, using the honorific for a reason. You called me useless. But if your date comes sooner than you thought, if your brother or nephew or neighbor or the boy you used to be walks free because of something I worked on, I hope you'll call that useful. Reeves's mouth opened and closed. A dozen words tried on his tongue and didn't fit. I don't want your thanks, Leon said, but I won't take your shame either. A chair scraped. A cough echoed. The mounted TV went on doing what TVs do, moving on, relentless and unbothered. And now everyone knew who he really was. Justice in prison rarely looks cinematic. It's paperwork and policy and the slow, steady turn of a wheel you assumed was broken. The warden stepped down from the catwalk. He spoke to the floor sergeant in a voice for 2 men only. The sergeant nodded once and moved with purpose. Reeves and his lieutenants were separated, then escorted, not dragged, not paraded, through the door that leads to offices and forms. On the unit, an officer with a scar under his eye cleared the aisle with his palm facing down. "Back to your seats," he said. Something in his tone had changed from earlier. He wasn't managing a crowd. He was protecting a witness. Leon picked up his tray from the floor. A kitchen worker in a hairnet, old enough to remember Leon's bill and young enough to be here anyway, stepped out from behind the counter and replaced it with a fresh one heavy with food. No words, just the clink of generosity. Leon nodded. "Thank you." The warden returned 10 minutes later, which felt like an hour in prison time. He spoke so everyone could hear. "Mr. Reeves has been placed in administrative segregation pending investigation into today's incident," he announced. "There will be no further theatrics on my unit, not while I'm warden." He turned to Leon. "Mr. Price, my office after lunch," he said. "You're going to consult for a few weeks." A murmur rose. Confusion, surprise, a little hope. "Consult? In here? About what?" The answer bloomed over the next days in small, real ways. The warden asked Leon to sit with the case managers and review the intake orientation so men could actually understand their parole eligibility instead of learning it as rumor. They reworked the language of the grievance form so it stopped sounding like a trap. Leon asked for a pilot program, weekly circle meetings on the chapel side of the yard, where older men could tell the younger ones how a decision at 9 a.m. can chase you for 20 years. Some guards rolled their eyes. A few smiled into their sleeves. But the wheel turned. And Reeves? Consequences look different when you can't swagger your way out. The investigator watched the camera footage. The write-up recommended loss of privileges. The parole board, who had once been told by Leon's law to consider age and rehabilitation, took a dim view of men who made violence the shape of their mornings. A letter would be waiting for Reeves at his next review. Continue programming. Demonstrate accountability. See you in 12 months. During the yard hour 2 Fridays later, Hall drifted near Leon by the track. He began, voice stuck on the rock of pride. "My uncle got out last year because of that bill." Leon didn't stop walking. "How's he doing?" "Good," Hall said. "He got a job at the tire place. He brings my grandma groceries on Saturdays." He hesitated. "Sorry I didn't, you know." "You did fine," Leon said. "We all do what we can on the day." That night the block made a new sound. Not laughter at somebody else's expense. Not the fatalistic hum of men going nowhere. It sounded like chairs scooting closer in the day room to listen. It sounded like men arguing about sports and then, awkwardly, about the difference between anger and planning. A week later, the local news did a follow-up. The anchor called Gray Ridge a surprising site of reform. A camera caught Leon on the chapel steps with a whiteboard and 3 markers, diagramming a path from GED class to re-entry job training that didn't require anyone to guess. No grand speeches, just the work. Half the block watched, pretending they weren't watching. Reeves and Seg watched too. Men find ways to see themselves even when the view is small. When the segment ended, the day room sat quieter than usual, as if each man were testing the air with a new lung. "Useless," someone muttered, not meaning it anymore, and a few men laughed, but gently, like the word had lost its poison. Let me tell you something. The way old men tell it on porches with the sun low and the cicadas loud. Respect isn't a stripe on your sleeve, or a shout you throw at a weaker man to hear your own echo. Respect is how you hold yourself when the room turns mean. It's what you do with power when you've got it, and what you refuse to do when you don't. Leon Price didn't win the way movies say a man wins. He didn't knock anybody down. He didn't hold the speech that makes cameras cry. He took a hit. He stood up. He told the truth in a voice that fit his bones. And when the door opened for justice, he didn't step through alone. He held it the way a gentleman holds it for the stranger behind him, not because he has to, but because the habit of dignity is contagious. As for Reeves, I won't lie to you. Men like him don't change because they're shamed in public. Shame hardens like plaster, but sometimes a man stares at a closed door long enough to wonder who put the lock there. Sometimes the fact that the person you hurt could have hurt you back and didn't grows a crack in the story you tell about strength. Through that crack comes light. If you're lucky, it's just enough to read by. Justice isn't fireworks. It's a steady hand on the wheel and a compass that remembers north. It's laws written clean and enforced fair. It's a warden who says, "Not on my unit," and means it. It's a kitchen worker sliding a second helping across the counter without a sermon. It's a young man telling the truth at the edge of his breath. It's an old man who knows the length of a day and spends it on mercy anyway. So remember, titles fade, elections pass like storms, crowds will cheer for the wrong things and fall silent for the right ones. But dignity, that quiet, stubborn kind, outlasts bruises. And when we treat people right, especially when we think no one's watching, justice begins. And if you listen closely, you can hear it even here, in a block with bad light and worse history, where a man once called another man useless and then had to live with the news. Respect doesn't come from titles. It comes from how you treat people when you think no one's watching. And that was the moment justice began.